Welcome to Season 5 of the Two Texts podcast. My name is David Harvey, and I'm here with my co-host, John Andrews. And this season, we're talking about the book of Jonah. Every episode will look at one text in Jonah before invariably leading us to talk about two texts, and often many more.
Hey David, it is wonderful to be with you. We are back after a little Christmas break, Advent season, and enjoyed that. And it's 2026. Happy New Year to everyone. Come on, it's we're entering into a new season, a new year, and may it be a blessed one for everyone, for you, your family, and for all of our listeners as we enter into another wonderful year.
Absolutely. And that means then that if this is 2026, we've been doing this podcast since 2021, so we turn 5 this year.
Come on,
Can you imagine?
True. That is true, yeah. Did we start around about May time, something like that? I think May 21.
Yes, May 2021.
That's incredible. That is
you start
incredible.
Giving out long-suffering awards to the people that have been with us since the beginning.
It's wonderful, actually. Again, I was ministering at the weekend and bumped into people, and people just loving the podcast and signing up for it as well. I was teaching last week somewhere and just mentioned it in passing, and the very next day in the teaching session, a young guy said, "Oh, I listened to your first podcast last night." So yeah, it's wonderful that people are still engaging with us and still enjoying. So yeah.
Yes, no, it's a great honor actually that people that listen to us, and it really is humbling when all of that happens. You know?
It totally is. So, David, we are, although we're in a new year, we are still in Jonah, and we're making a journey. We're still in chapter 3 of Jonah, though rapidly hurtling as far as two text speed is concerned, hurtling towards the end of the chapter. And last time I thought we had an incredible, I personally really enjoyed our conversation last time. And it was really centered around verse 5 of chapter 3 and that gorgeous expression, "So believed the people of Nineveh in God." My goodness. And they proclaimed this fast. And this really is a bit of a turning point now in the story. And it really opens up, I suppose, the dramatic events in the rest of the chapter, which we're going to discuss today.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think the response is very, very interesting for us. So we did read this way back before Christmas break, but why don't I read just a few more verses again, just to remind us of where things are unfolding. So we've heard Jonah's very short sermon. We've heard verse 5, the Ninevites' response, which is to believe God. And then the story picks up that Jonah's preaching is rising through the ranks of Nineveh. And we'll read from verse 6 here. Let's just read these 4 verses from 6 through to 10 of Jonah chapter 3.
Go for it.
It says, "When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows, God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish." When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened.
Wow. Come on. Amazing. Listening to you read that again, I was struck again by the forceful symmetry of the text that we've been considering. And it says here in verse 6, when the word of the Lord, that's incorrect. And when the word came to the king of Nineveh, I love this expression, he arose from his throne. And of course, there's a lovely echo for us back to chapter 1, where the word of the Lord comes to Jonah the first time, and he arose. Exactly the same expression, but of course, instead of arising to an action in response to God, Jonah arises, as it were, and runs from God. And there's again, even in our English text, there's a lovely echo of this. If we've been paying attention to the marvelous, if you like, poetic theology, the way this is written, there's another echo here, isn't there? Where you've got Jonah arising to flee from the presence of God. Seems like we talked about that a long time ago. But here's the king, this person of authority arising from his throne. And then I love that lovely expression, and laid aside his cloak. The absolute opposite of Jonah. Jonah arises to flee. There's a disobedience. You may even want to argue a slight arrogance in Jonah in his response in chapter 1. And yet the arising of the king in chapter 3, verse 6 is one of abject humility. And so both doing the same action, but with completely different mentality and heart.
Yes, it is. I mean, this way of reading Jonah, of course, is really significant, isn't it? That words are. Hopefully, we've convinced everyone by now that words are not used aimlessly in Jonah.
Yeah.
So there is this choice of word draws our attention to this, and I mean, I was pondering as well this notion of the internal illusions and the external illusions. I say this with, like, there's a little irony and pun intended. I was struck by when you were talking about this, that when Jonah's warning reaches the king, right? But the Hebrew is really fascinating there because it's the Hebrew is nagah hadavar, right? So the nagah yana is how it's presented in its current form in this, but it's almost like the word strikes the king, right? Like this word, like when it reaches the king, it touches the king, but it what I've been trying to do when I'm reading Jonah is anything that strikes me, pun intended, as unusual, or just I think, oh, that's a strange word. I've gone looking, right? Yeah. And so what's interesting here is that word is what the Lord does to Pharaoh's household when he takes Sarah in Genesis. When he takes Abraham's wife, he is struck with a disease, right? Yes. When the Lord fights Jacob, he strikes the socket of Jacob's hip, right? When the Israelites are preparing for Passover, they strike the door frames with the blood, of the sacrifice, and so this it's quite interesting that there's a I want to say I don't want to mean it in the wrong term, but there's an aggressiveness, that's the word I'm looking for, to this word. Kind of violently reaches the king almost at some level. There's real graphic imagery going on here. So the king is can I say punched by the word, and it sort of punches him into rising up from his throne. Like his reaction to the forcefulness of the word of the Lord is so contrasted. I mean, I don't know what you make of that, but I thought it was really interesting.
Oh, I love that. In fact, I've been tracing that with you, and if you wanted a graphic illustration of this marvelous word is another one in Torah in Exodus. It says, then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet. So the word translated cast there is our strike. So it's literally, there's this sense in which Moses literally is hit, impacted by this action of Zipporah. So if you think about that as a dramatic action, forceful action, a striking of something, then this imagery really is quite strong. It's not just that the king has heard, oh, that's a nice little sermon, but he's been dynamically, forcefully, dramatically impacted by that. That's just a beautiful, I do like that. I love that sort of reflection on the Ga. It's really, really good. I hadn't quite spotted that in terms of its force there. That's really lovely.
And you get the whole sentence is really interesting, isn't it? So the word strikes the king. He rises. He takes off. He covers. He sits down. Like it's a very graphic sentence, and I don't mean graphic in that inappropriate sense, but graphic in that like things are happening in these
big
few
actions.
words, aren't they? Yeah.
They are. They're big actions, and you get the sort of, again, if you look at all the sort of action words within that, arose, laid aside, covered in sackcloth, set in ashes. So they are big and dynamic actions in response to this striking of the word, aren't they?
Yes.
So we are impacted, and in the same way that we were impacted by verse 5, so believed the people. Yeah. And then they proclaimed a fast, and just looking at it now, and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least. So again, in believing, they engage in two dynamic actions: proclaiming and putting on sackcloth and fasting. So you've got these dynamic moments that are sort of going on there. So yeah, incredible.
And it's interesting as well, isn't it, that the king is impacted by this, but then mirrors the behavior of the people. Right?
Indeed.
And so we get this sort of the greatest to the least put on the sackcloth. And in fact, we hear of the quote unquote greatest last in that list. That the king is the one who then hears, but does exactly the same thing. And I mean, I'm fascinated by the fact that they know to do this. It sounds so Jewish as a response. Yeah, I can't help but think something's going on in all of that.
Yes, and of course the sort of the imagery around things like sackcloth, ashes is one associated with great mourning. It's one associated with crisis, isn't it? So whenever we see these actions, especially in a Jewish world, it's to do with a crisis moment. So clearly something has gripped both the people, as we talked about last time, but now the king himself. And of course, you get that sort of sense, I think, as we move into the next verse, it refers to the nobles as well, doesn't it? It's not only just impacting the king, but it's also impacting his royal court, or at least the court of authority, and how they respond to that. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, it really is. I'm trying to sort of hold all these ideas in mind, but you do have this quite. I'm attempting a theory here, so. But just have a look with me for a second, and this might be wild. Like your listeners, you're welcome to hear John just throw this out right away. But just compare Jonah 1:5 for a second. This is a bit of abstract thinking. Jonah 1:5 to 3:7, right? Yeah. Because all of the sailors were afraid, and each of them cried out, right?
Yes.
And they cry out, and then they throw everything off into the sea. Okay. Yep. What's really interesting is, and I don't know if you're looking at this in the Hebrew, the crying out that they do is exactly the same word as what the king does. Yes. So all the sailors were afraid, and they proclaimed, right? Yep. And they start ditching everything off. So you've got these two really fascinating scenes. And bearing in mind, we're spotting the similarities of chapter 3 to chapter 1 in multiple episodes of our podcast. But it just struck me, I don't really know if I'm going anywhere with this, John, but it just struck me that in chapter 1, they cry out to their own God and turf everything off into the sea. But now, the other side of Jonah's sermon, this Ninevite king, he issues a crying out and then responds, can I say this, like a good Torah observant Jew in a time of crisis and repentance. Yes. And actually, because they have believed God. And again, I'm kind of not sure where I'm going with this point, except that it's interesting that proclamation word precedes the casting off of things.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the NIV translates it, that sense of urgent. Sometimes it translates it urgent calling, but yes, but again, it's a mirror for me. It's a mirror of all through this book. You've seen Gentiles respond in ways that you would normally have expected a Jewish audience to respond.
Yes.
So if this was Jonah speaking to the city of Samaria or speaking to the people of Jerusalem, then this response would go, yeah, that's standard practice sort of thing. But this is the reaction of Gentiles who, as far as we are aware, aren't initiated in the ways of Torah, and yet they seem to be responding absolutely appropriately, whether it's on a ship or whether it's here in the city. And you can't help again but see these gorgeous mirrors and moments of symmetry, connection, intertextuality, even within the text itself, where lots of beautiful plays are being made on the responses of the people and what they do. So for me, there is an absolute symmetry in that, and I think when you look at the behavior of the sailors in general, they were afraid. There was a fear that moved them along. They prayed, they worshipped. I think you're getting all of these sentiments again repeated in terms of the king's reaction. The same sorts of language. Even without delving into the language, it looks the same. It feels the same. And even on the ship with the sailors, they fast. So there's even that casting off of the stuff, and they fast. The king, it's a different word. I just checked it out there, but the king lays aside his robes and fasts. But you're getting similar actions in the context of those two moments.
And then you get this sort of stretch forward, don't you? Because now, initially, it could seem a little strange. So verse 5, a fast is proclaimed, all of them from greatest to least put on sackcloth. Then the king hears about it. He does the same as the people. And then he issues a proclamation that some initially could seem a little late. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, wait a minute, you're issuing a proclamation that has already happened. Everybody's doing this, except that now animals are very specifically drawn into. I can't think of another space where animals are instructed to fast. But it, in a weird way, in Jonah, it doesn't feel out of place because you've got nature behaving. But it also feels to me like, John, that this is a stretch forward to how the book's going to end, where God himself is going to show his interest in animals at the end of chapter 4. Do you think there's a little bit of almost future focus going on at this exact moment?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting for me. I totally agree with that. And I think with having read the book to the end, you do get, oh, hold on, that's interesting. You're hearing that bit there and then that bit there. So I think that helps us absolutely 100%. And what fascinated me as well is the king's proclamation strengthens the language. So when you look at the people, they proclaim a fast and they put on sackcloth. So by fast, we're assuming there's no food. But then when you look at the king's words, it strengthened a little bit. So he goes, neither man nor beast, herd or flock, taste anything. And then it says this, let them not feed nor drink water, which is like emergency mode. So like a fast of not eating and not drinking is and I mean, in biblical parlance is like, that's the emergency button, isn't it? Because you wouldn't normally have a prolonged fast that would
especially not in a city that's in the middle of a desert.
Exactly, that's not drinking water. So water would be absolutely essential. So the fact that you've got a non-drinking fast as well feels like they've hit the emergency button. You know, an emergency alert has gone out on all the government apps. Everybody stop, whatever you're doing, stop and do that. So it does feel, and of course the animals, everything is swept into this response. I mean, it really is profound. We have two gorgeous dachshunds. I mean, imagine like me dressing my dachshunds in sackcloth and not feeding them today. I mean, they think, what on earth is going on? But even they've been pulled into the drama that if we don't do something, then the Lord may, in fact, destroy us. God may destroy us. So you do feel that though verse 5 and verse 6 mirror one another, the words of the king in verse 7 seem to be taking it to a whole new level, which I think, again, the Lord himself reflects on at the end. If it feels to me, Dave, absolutely a bit of future-proofing, but also if the king has bothered to say, let's make sure even the animals are fasting, even the animals are in sackcloth, then it feels like the Lord has almost reciprocated that idea at the end and goes, well, if you put the animals in sackcloth, well, I'm going to sort of make sure I look after the animals as well. There's almost a sense in which, in a sort of a beautiful, again, poetic way, we've got to be careful here, but the animals are pulled into the salvation moment, that they too are saved. Because of course, they would be destroyed if the city was destroyed.
Yes.
So it's fascinating.
Which, of course, is a very biblical notion. Like it's interesting to me. You read about Isaiah's visions of the future, the nature of creation as exemplary of God's restoration is actually a dominant theme in Scripture. I think there's I say this cautiously because I dare say, but there's a level I find within modernity where the question, do pets go to heaven, right, gets laughed at by the theologians sometimes. But there's also a level where Scripture wants to portray God's restoration of the world as a harmony of animals and plants and trees and of all things. So there's this level of which, I think we want to be cautious. I think of trying to suggest that animals have souls like humans are, but at the same time we want to be cautious of this idea that God's future doesn't involve all of his good creation that he has given to be, and I think we often fall foul. We either almost deify animals, which I think is unwise, or we go the other way and we you end up with a picture of God's restoration, which is disembodied souls of humans and nothing else. And I would often encourage people dive into Isaiah's visions of the future, and they're of a whole creation, right? So hence to God's question at the end of Jonah: do you not think I care about animals?
That's it. No, I think it's great, and we've just come through the Advent season, and of course, as part of Advent, probably like you, I've been reading some of the great Advent passages, and of course Isaiah's vision of the Edenic restoration of the world. When he talks about the Messianic age, and you ultimately think forward to Revelation and a new heaven and a new earth, it is inconceivable that doesn't include an animal presence, and they after all are part of his original creative genius and idea. But of course, I think one of the dangers is sometimes we read Isaiah and we just purely see it as metaphor. It's just a picture of this gorgeous place that we're going to live in with the Messiah. And of course, it may well be metaphor, or it could be pointing to the dramatic recreational salvation of Messiah, that Messiah actually causes the lion and the lamb to lie down together, that actually there's such a reversal of the fall, a reversal of the curse, that actually things that shouldn't be sitting together, children playing near the cobra's nest, all of that sort of language that you're getting in prophets like Isaiah, that it mustn't be ignored. So there is this gorgeous Eden-like echo here in Jonah, that these wonderful Gentiles who are responding to the Lord include the creative order within that. And God seems to nod at that idea at the end of the book. And you're right. I mean, we don't want to overcook that and go into a world that's clearly not being substantiated biblically. But I think too often we have neglected a creational understanding of the messianic redemption. And, doesn't Romans even tell us that the creation itself groans? It is groaning for a moment of redemption. So the Messiah hasn't just come to save humans. The Messiah has come to save creation. He's come to save the whole universe, which has been dynamically and dramatically and drastically and catastrophically impacted by the fall.
Well, and the thing, to your point about Romans, is that the implication of Romans is that creation actually might know better than humanity that things are broken, right? That what happens is this, the children of God are drawn up into the sufferings that creation already knows about. Whenever I read that passage, I always think about the images in Revelation where, John's vision is, who are the faithful? But there's always this vision of all creation worshiping the Lord, right? And so there's the question is always, will the humans catch up? At some level, that's, and I think that underlying theme throughout Scripture is so powerfully strong that I think that's what we're seeing. This ordained fish, this directed worm, and these sackcloth covered cows. I mean, it's wild on one level, but it's also drawing us into the mystery of this God who is much bigger than I think we imagine, isn't he? This God whose salvation is broader than what we might realize.
Yes, and many times I've sat and tried to reflect, what will the new creation look like? I mean, what will this be like? Is it what we have now but flawless, or will it be brand new? But whatever it is, surely it's got to in some way reflect the original creation. It's got to in some way, because God's original ideas were good. God's original ideas were, in fact, he declared them 6 times to be good. And he declared ultimately on day 6, I would argue, humanity to be very good, the pinnacle of God's creation. So all of that original idea, lost in the drama of the fall, has got to be part of a recreation, redemption idea, which we will enjoy. But we're getting a little taste of the drama here, where a city literally sweeps up every single animal, everything that's moving has to line up with this repentance, this calling out to God. It's really quite dramatic, really. And you just imagine going back in a time machine and walking into that city and seeing every living thing. Every living thing covered in sackcloth. I mean, it's just
crazy.
I mean, it is absolutely dramatic, isn't it? And we can rush past it because we're rushing to the punchline where God's going to do some wonderful stuff. But actually, we mustn't rush past a dramatic moment where every single citizen and every single living thing paid attention, or was made to pay attention to the potential catastrophe of judgment that was coming their way.
And I think that, I mean, that's the stunning, I love the way you've tied all that together, John. And even I was thinking, you alluded to Isaiah 11 a moment ago, and you get this sense of, wolf with lamb, calf with lion, children are playing in cobras' nests, and then there's this line, I can't remember the exact sequence from memory, but then it says, and a little child will lead them. Right. And it reminds me of, that Adam and Eve are put into this garden to lead these animals, to care for these animals, to name these animals. And Isaiah's vision of the future is that not even a man now, but a child, so will be the harmony of the world, that a child is in this level of beauty. And of course, what's interesting then for our text is, because we're layering allusions on top of each other, in the middle of this, in verse 8, you get like another just drop-in word that I think is so significant in the prophetic literature. So we get, let people and animals be covered with sackcloth, let everyone call urgently on God, the NIV reads. And then it says, let them give up their evil ways. And this word translated give up is this word shuv, right? Which of course is about returning, is about repentance. It's a huge word in Jeremiah. It's a massive word in the prophetic texts. And again, I find it hard to believe that the ancient reader doesn't hear that word and realize, oh, this is again Jonah's commentary on the returning of people. Let them turn or return to the Lord. And so I don't feel like we can miss a word like shuv appearing in a prophetic text in the Old Testament without commenting on it, can we?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. And in fact, I thought you were just going to run it on, because if you run it on, so into, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. If you then run it on into verse 9.
Oh yes, there's a lot of shuving.
There's a lot of shuving. In fact, we've got the Lord shuving twice. So let me read it in English as we've got it. So verse 9, then read, who knows, God may relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Now, it's really unfortunate here. And I think the NIV translation is lovely here, but they've so you get relent is the word that's being translated here, shuv. So
yes.
That's rated slightly more literal. Who knows, God may turn and with compassion turn. So let me have a wee look, a slightly more, who can tell if God will turn and relent and then turn away from his anger so that we may not perish. So you've got a double turning. So you've got this. So if you look at it then in running from verses 8 to 9, you've got this proclamation going out. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up or turn, shuv, from their evil ways and their violence. Hey, Hamas. Wow. Who knows? God may yet shuv, relent, and with compassion, shuv, turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. I mean, my goodness, if you were sitting there in sort of synagogue school as a little boy, listening to that being read, you're going, that's, as you said, that's a lot of shuving. There's a lot of shuving going on there. And it really is, it's meant to be like that. I think you've got this dramatic sense that the king, the leader, is saying, if we turn, maybe God will turn. And it's gorgeous. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous sort of play on this beautiful thing, which then, leads us to an incredible climax in verse 10. But I think before getting to verse 10, we've got to recognize this incredible symmetry that is, the people turn, God will turn. Yes. And he will respond to their turning by turning.
Yeah.
It's magnificent. It's just, and as you say, echoes of Jeremiah everywhere but I think we'll see even those even stronger when we get to verse 10. But you've got this incredible turning moment. It's beautiful.
Yes, and this notion then of, like, if you were to read, if anyone was to do a deep dive of Jeremiah, this notion of shuv, this returning, is at some level the whole theme. Will the people return to the Lord? Will the Lord turn his heart towards the people? And then ultimately, and will the Lord return the people back to Israel, right? So you've got this returning upon returning upon returning. Absolutely. There's the returning of our hearts. There's the returning of the Lord. There's the returning of us to our place. And so it just feels to me like Jonah's drawing us in again to this. The people of Nineveh are behaving like the prophets, hope that the people of Israel will behave, and this strange sense that these Ninevites are somehow quicker to the draw than the people of Israel are, and I think this image then, I mean, I'd almost be tempted to say that we might be treading into almost the core purpose of this story now. That the Lord is a God who is looking for returners. And then this text, with all of its weirdness and strangeness, is a text for Israel. So here the people of Israel are seeing, look at what happens to a foreign nation who have returned their hearts to the Lord, right? Because I think one of the things we've got to be careful with is, I think with Jonah, is do not think, oh, it's just an interesting history book that the people of Israel would read to know about a weird story that happened one day. It's a prophetic book. It's understood as one of the prophets. But it's written in Hebrew, so it's written for the people of Israel. So there's a question, I think, for us is, what are the people of Israel supposed to learn from this prophetic book, which is not a story about them, it's a story about people they dislike. And so that draws me to just want to pay attention to this shuv language so much closer, because I think they're being told this is a returning God and you are being invited to return to him. So that's all from Jonah and us for this episode. Keep diving into the text yourself and enjoying this wonderful book of the Bible. We'd love it if you rated, reviewed, or shared this episode with a friend. And we also want to say thank you to all of our listeners who financially support the show, sharing the weight of producing the podcast with us. If you'd like to support the show, visit twotexts.com and follow the instructions from there. We'll be back soon with a new episode, but until then, from us, goodbye.